Hey everyone, this is your host, Peter Zablocki, and you're listening to the History Shorts podcast. I hope everyone's having a great day so far, and thank you so much for making this show a small part of that. If you'd like to help me out with a small gesture, please leave History Shorts a rating or a review, and click that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. For sources and books used as the basis for these episodes, how to advertise on a show, and other information such as a list of our upcoming guests on the conversation series, or a link to our Patreon account where you can listen to exclusive episodes not heard here, please visit www.historyshortspodcast.com. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate podcast listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the globe, all in one place. Download Podcast Republic now and take your podcast experience to the next level. Having said all of that, in the rugged mountains and freezing valleys of Korea during the early 1950s, a new kind of battlefield hospital emerged, one that would forever change the face of military medicine. These were the Mobile Army Surgical Hospitals, more commonly known as MASH units, conceived not in the sterile halls of medical academia, but in the unforgiving realities of war. They were born out of necessity, innovation, and the unwavering commitment of those who served within them, transforming the survival prospects of wounded soldiers and pioneering techniques that would echo far beyond the battlefield. Here is the rest of that story.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
In the sweltering heat of the Southwest Pacific Theater during World War II, where jungles swallowed armies whole and supply lines stretched like fragile threads across vast oceans, the seeds of revolutionary medical innovation were sown. Colonel Percy J. Carroll, the chief surgeon for U.S. Army forces in the Far East, stared at the maps of Australia and New Guinea in 1942, grappling with the brutal reality. Traditional field hospitals, cumbersome beasts with hundreds of beds and tons of equipment, just couldn't keep pace with the fluid chaos of island-hopping warfare. Soldiers wounded in the thick of battle often endured agonizing hours, or sometimes even days, before reaching surgical care, their chances of survival dwindling with every mile. Carroll, drawing on makeshift experiments at the 4th General Hospital in Melbourne, envisioned something radical, a lightweight, portable unit that could leapfrog forward with the troops, delivering life-saving surgery just mere miles from the front lines. These early portable surgical hospitals, initially provisional outfits scrapped together from existing medical personnel, weighed in at just enough for men to carry on their backs, tents, instruments, and supplies pared down to the bone. By 1943, the U.S. Army formalized them, activating over 100 units that would scatter across theaters from the Pacific to Europe, saving thousands by performing emergency operations under canvas roofs amid the din of artillery. It was here, in the blood-soaked mud of places like Guadalcanal, that the blueprint for the Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, or MASH, emerged. Now, as the guns fell silent in 1945, the lessons of these portable units didn't fade. In fact, they evolved. Surgeon Michael DeBakely, a brilliant mind who had witnessed the inefficiencies of evacuation chains while in Italy, championed a new design, a 60-bed hospital that could pack up, move, and set up in just hours, bringing experienced surgeons directly to the wounded. Conceived on August 23, 1945, just weeks after Hiroshima, the MASH was meant to bridge the gap between battalion aid stations and a rear hospital, ensuring that the golden hour, that critical window after injury where the intervention could mean life or death, wasn't squandered on endless transport. But it would be the frozen hell of the Korean War erupting in 1950 like a sudden storm that thrust the MASH into its defining role. North Korean forces poured across the 38th parallel, catching American troops off guard and turning the peninsula into a meat grinder of hills and valleys. Traditional medical logistics crumbled under this onslaught. Wounded GIs faced treacherous evacuations over rugged terrain, where jeeps bogged down and litters slipped from exhausted hands. Enter the MASH units. Units like the 8055th and 8076th mobilized swiftly, setting up shop in tents that billowed like sails in a biting wind. Their operating tables, illuminated by generator-powered lights, flickered against the night. Helicopters like the Bell H-13 Sioux revolutionized the game for these MASH units, whisking casualties from the battlefield in just minutes, slashing mortality rates from 4% in World War II to staggering 2.5% for those who reached a MASH alive. Survival soared to 97% overall, which was a miracle forged in this crucible of innovation. Amid the sounds of incoming choppers and the metallic tang of blood, heroes emerged from the ranks of ordinary men and women that were thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Take Captain Alvin Vincent Blount Jr., a black surgeon from North Carolina who arrived in Korea in 1951, assigned to the 8225th MASH. In an era when segregation scarred the U.S. military, Blount became the first African American to serve as chief of surgery in an integrated unit, operating tirelessly on soldiers of all races amid relentless casualty waves during the Battle of Heartbreak Ridge. His hands, steady despite the freezing cold that turned instruments into ice, repaired shattered limbs and punctured lungs, embodying a quiet defiance against prejudice while saving lives. Nurses, too, stood as pillars of resilience. Marie Cottrell, a World War II rejectee for being too thin, finally enlisted and found herself in the 8055th MASH, where she tended to the dying under shell fire, her slender frame bellying a steel will that comforted men far from home. One nurse from the unit later recounted dodging enemy patrols during training exercises, a prelude to real terror of Korean winters where frostbite vied with shrapnel for victims. And then there was Dr. H. Richard Hornberger, whose experiences in the 8055th would inspire the fictional Hawkeye Pierce. Though Hornberger himself loathed the TV show's anti-war slant, preferring to remember the grim efficiency of patching up boys barely out of high school amid the absurdity of war. The rhythm of MASH was symphony of controlled chaos. Tents buzzed with urgency as medics sorted the incoming red tags for immediate surgery, yellow for observation, green for the walking wounded, black for those beyond hope. A system refined in Korea that would redefine civilian emergency rooms worldwide. Surgeons worked 12-hour shifts that blurred into 24, their scrubs stiffed with dry blood fueled by black coffee and the adrenaline of knowing each incision could turn the tide for a young life. During the brutal Chosin Reservoir campaign in the late stages of the war, when Marines retreated through blizzards against overwhelming Chinese forces, MASH units like the 8077th, immortalized as the 4077th in popular culture, handled surgeries of frostbitten and bullet-riddled troops, performing miracles with limited supplies. One surgeon assigned to the 82nd 09th, after hastily training at Camp Atterbury, recalled the awful work of amputating limbs frozen solid. His voice cracking years later as the memory of a Marine who whispered thanks before slipping away. Heroism wasn't always in the scalpel. It was in the quiet acts as well, like nurses holding hands through the night or corpsmen braving sniper fire to drag the wounded to safety. These units, supporting divisions of 10,000 to 20,000 soldiers, moved with the ebb and flow of battle lines, packing up under duress and redeploying in 24 hours. Their mobility, a lifeline in a war of attrition. As the armistice silenced the guns in 1953, MASH's legacy lingered, but the next conflict would test its adaptability in unforeseen ways. Vietnam, with its jungles and guerrilla ambushes erupting in earnest in 1965, demanded a different breed of mobility. With no fixed front lines, traditional MASH setups kind of faltered. Only the second MASH saw brief action from October 1966 to July 1967, treating a group of casualties from booby traps and sniper fire before being overshadowed by medical unit self-contained transportables, or the MUSTs. MUSTs, with inflatable wards and air-conditioned trailers, addressed Vietnam's sweltering humidity and the diverse wounds, burns from napalm, infections from punji steaks, that overwhelmed older designs. Yet the spirit of MASH endured in the dust of helicopters that evacuated soldiers from rice paddies, echoing Korea's innovations. By the war's end, though, in 1975, the MASH had evolved. Its mobility was now more airborne, but the core principle of forward care under fire, that remained unbreakable. The deserts of the Persian Gulf War in 1990 or 91 reignited the MASH's relevance, as Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait drew American forces into high-tech blitzkrieg. Unit like the 5th MASH, part of the 44th Medical Brigade, deployed to Saudi Arabia in September of 1990, becoming the first fully operational Army hospital in the theater. Advancing 6 times with the 24th Infantry Division during Desert Storm, this MASH unit treated coalition troops and Iraqi POWs alike, navigating minefields and chemical threats while performing surgeries in sand-choked tents. By the early 2000s, however, the MASH era drew to a close, phased out in favor of Combat Support Hospitals, or CSH, and forward surgical teams. Modular, even more agile units better suited to asymmetric warfare. The last MASH, the 2012th, converted in 2006, its deactivation marking the end of an icon that had spanned 6 long decades. The MASH transformed warfare's grim arithmetic, turning potential graves into stories of survival. Thanks for listening.